Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Neville and welcome to Selective Imagery. Hello and welcome to So You Want to Collect Cameras? Tips and Advice from an Old Timer. Hello everyone, this is Jeff Neville for Selective Imagery. I'm doing a recording here on Restream to try to do a video, and this is going to be called So You Want to Collect Cameras? Tips and Advice from an Old Timer. And I'm wearing the appropriate shirt since we're going to be talking a lot about vintage cameras and things you should look out for. So here you go. Here is the official shirt for the show. I think most of you get it. So what I decided to do was to come up with just some questions. Ask myself, if I was someone out there thinking about buying old stuff, what questions might I have? And I could have written 1,000 questions. I just pulled some out of my head, put them to paper, put down the answers to the questions, and I'm going to share those with you first. So, probably one of the more important questions when buying old cameras, vintage cameras, it isn't so much the camera itself, because as most photographers will tell you, the lens is the most important part of your kit. Camera bodies come and go. The lenses are the most important thing. So, what types of lens problems are common in vintage cameras? Well, you have probably the worst of them all is fungus. It thrives in warm, humid, dark environments, attics, basements, garages, any area that doesn't have any type of temperature control or humidity control, and where the temperature swings up and down a lot. Um, and a lot of it depends on how the person or persons stored their camera. They put silica gel in the bag, and even that only lasts for so long, right? So, to be honest with you, the cameras that you buy, whether it be from eBay or KEH or a camera dealer, you don't know the history of that camera, and neither do the people that are selling it for the most part. The difference is, at least if you get it through a camera store, they know what to look for, they know what to check, and they're going to probably warranty that camera for a certain period of time. So they're going to go through it. Somebody that's just an auction house selling estates, that's all as is stuff. They can only give you a certain amount of information about what they're selling. They don't usually show you a lot of pictures. You don't get pictures all around the camera with the back opened. You're really buying something blind, and you better get a really, really good deal if you're going to do that. And even on eBay, it's amazing what people try to get for cameras that are in really, really crummy shape, because a lot of them, they just pick them up at a garage sale or a tag sale, or uncle, Leo died and I found this in his garage or in his basement, and I went online and I got an idea of what people are selling them for, so I'm going to try to sell it for that. But then when you ask questions, they say, well, I don't know anything about cameras. Well, you knew enough to jack the price way up, even though you don't know if the camera's any good or not. That's the biggest problem. Okay. Most of the people selling the stuff do not have a clue what to look for, and they price it like they know what to look for. They price it high but they have no clue really if the camera's any good or not, or even if it works. So fungus, when you see it on a lens, it could look like a white fuzzy spot, a web-like pattern, or a growth within the lens. And if you catch it really, really early, you can remove it with hydrogen peroxide. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, but that's only if you're willing to take a lens apart and you have the right tools to do that. Otherwise, the lens is worthless to you. And if the fungus has been there for decades, it's going to etch into the glass, and it's going to basically ruin the coatings if it's coating on the lens to begin with, or it just damages the glass to the point where your image quality is going to be horrible. So don't even buy it. Don't, you see one little wisp, one little spot, really, really small, you might consider it if you're able to do the work yourself. The other killer is haze. Haze is caused just by normal degradation of lens elements or coatings, or sometimes even the result of the types of lubricants used in lenses. I read an article somewhere where some people stated that, Leica lenses from the 50s, and this is decades later, would develop haze that was caused by lubricants based on, whale oil or what have you. And that outgassing from that put a haze on the lens. And, in some cases, it can be removed with a simple cleaning. If it's been sitting on the lens for 30, 40 years, it may be more difficult and have to get done professionally. And doing a CLA on a vintage lens, on a high-end lens for its time, is not a cheap thing to do. Another issue is scratches and chips, and that's just more of a handling thing. And it's something that you normally can see when you look at images, and that's pretty obvious to find. Um, Specks of dust, and it's hard to quantify how many specks of dust you can have when you look at a camera lens and have a minimal to no effect on your image, but you would be surprised. Unless the thing is caked with dust, you can have a fair amount of dust spots in there, and your image will be okay. You'll find old glass from the 50s and before that, due to manufacturing, the level of manufacturing on lenses, where you can have air bubbles in the glass, and that's something that's commonly found, and that was considered acceptable. In terms of scratches and chips, a deep scratch can affect the quality of your image. Light, what they call wispy cleaning scratches from, one or two little scratches from cleaning the lens, you're usually going to be okay. Balsam separation. This is something that you usually only see on the old cameras from lenses from the 1800s into probably the 1940s, up to the 1940s. Folding bellows cameras, that type of thing. And that's really from the glue that they would glue lens elements together, and the glue starts to separate. And it almost looks like the glass is fractured around the circumference of the lens. And not something that you're going to spend to get fixed. And if you're just buying a camera, you're buying a camera that's over 100 years old, and you're not looking to shoot with it, and you get the right price for it based on its condition, as it not being a working camera, then who cares, right? It's a display item. It's just showing a piece of history. No problem. If you want to actually shoot with the camera, big problem. Don't buy it. Optical aberrations, that's another thing. Okay. Things such as it's just a constraint of technology. The older the lens, they're not corrected like the lenses you get today. We're all very, very spoiled with what we have available to us today. But when you're buying cameras that are older and you actually want to use them, don't expect the lenses to perform to the level of a brand new, RF mount lens or a Z mount lens or anything at the high end. It's just not going to do it. Now they have what some people will call character, certain characteristics, and that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. But like I said, you're going to have astigmatism that will be higher, which is the ability, the focusing between the vertical and horizontal lines, where one may be sharp and one may not be. You can have coma, where stars appear as comet shapes, or distortion, where straight lines appear curved. Just be aware these things exist, but it's more of a technological thing than what was considered a defect back in the day. And if you do use hydrogen peroxide to remove fungus, um, some people will say, well, will it damage the lens? Yes, it can if it's overly done. But usually, if you're removing the fungus, it's something that you're doing in a matter of minutes, and that's not going to be an issue. Um, if you repeatedly have to do it, which you should really never have to do, it's really going to be okay. But you just want to make sure you rinse the lens in distilled water, and I recommend you use distilled water, not tap water, and dry it with a clean lens cleaning cloth. Does lighter fluid damage lens coatings? Believe it or not, there are many people that have done YouTube videos and they've said they've used lighter fluid. And lighter fluid can degrade certain coatings or dissolve them even on certain lenses. And unless you're an expert in lens coatings, make the assumption that if you get it on there and you don't get rid of it right away, it may cause a problem. It could reduce clarity in your image, and I recommend that you use dedicated lens cleaning solutions on your lenses. Um, some ask, they look at some lenses about buying a used lens. They'll say, oh, how come some of the lens focus rings or the grips, the rubber is like chalky looking white? What is that stuff? Well, that's just oxidation caused by outgassing of the additives that are in the rubber material, rubber compound, and its exposure to ultraviolet light. So you can try a dry toothbrush to scrub it off and have a moist cloth, maybe with some IPA on it, and wipe it off. And then once you've cleaned it off, then you can reapply some Armor All or 303 Speed Detailer, something of that nature, to restore the color and the shine. But you want to make sure you wipe off you let that detailing stuff sit on there for a second or two, let it soak in a little bit, but then wipe off the excess, because you don't want to get it all over the rest of the camera or get it on your hands and then touch all the different parts of the camera. Now, what causes certain plastics on vintage cameras to become sticky? And this seems to be something that is common, unfortunately, to Minolta cameras. Their autofocus cameras, their Maxim series cameras, Maxim 7s, Maxim 9s, and others. And that's also just a deterioration of the material over time. The polymers break down and they release small molecules, which result in the stickiness. And it's something that can be removed. It just requires a lot of elbow grease using isopropyl alcohol. And like I said, you can remove the stickiness, and then you touch up everything with a little bit of application of a detailer and wipe it dry, and no one would ever know it had anything wrong with it at all. Unfortunately, many people, I bought a camera that was listed as a mint condition camera, and the whole back of it, when I took it out of the bag, was all sticky. Nobody mentioned it. Person didn't mention it. I had a choice: send it back or deal with it, figure out how to remove it. I chose to remove it, and I got a great looking camera, and it's fine. But a lot of people don't reveal information. So just buyer beware. And if you're looking at that particular lineup of cameras, because they do have somewhat of a history with this, if you're going to buy a Maxim camera, or ask the question, say, is there any parts of the camera that are sticky that I should know about before I buy it? They probably won't answer you anyway. So you'll notice some cameras, and I've noticed it on older Leica SLR cameras. Lots of times the plastic, when they started putting the plastic on the film advance levers, the plastic got chalky and started looking white as well. And that's basically the same thing as what we're talking about here. And you just do the same thing that we've talked about. You clean it as best you can, and then you put some armor all on it or other detailer on it, and then wipe it dry, and then you'll restore the color, and it'll be fine. Um, if you get into collecting rangefinder cameras, old rangefinder cameras, lots of times they have like the lever on them that you use to do the focusing, and sometimes you can't focus at all, and that's because the lubricants in the lens have gotten hard as a rock. And if you try to force it, you're just going to ruin the camera. So don't try to force it. So you have a couple things that you could do. You can try heating the focus ring area slightly with a hair dryer, and I'd start with low heat, not just start off with the highest temperature you can, and then see if once it's warmed up, whether you can break it free without getting too carried away. And the other thing is, here's one situation where you'd use lighter fluid. If you have a gap in there on the lens where you can apply a small amount of lighter fluid in there, it'll soften up the glue. And once you work the lens quite a bit, uh, it can be as good as new. But the risk is if you go and you put the lighter fluid on there and you put too much, and then if let's say you set the camera down and this stuff could weep down and get on a lens element, and then you've got a cleaning problem that you have to deal with. So I'm not recommending that you don't run out and do that. I'm just saying it's a technique that works. It's something that people do that work on their own cameras, but I'm not endorsing it and saying go out and do it, because sometimes it causes as much of a headache cleaning it up as it does freeing the lubricant. Next thing, does DEET that is found in your insect repellent damage plastic parts on your camera body? Absolutely yes. If you soak your hands in DEET and everything, and you grab your camera, you could literally degrade plastics or other synthetic materials on your camera body. You could soften them. You could craze them, dissolve them. Uh, so you don't want to put DEET on your hands. Basically, spray it on your clothing. Don't get it on your hands. If you put it on your arm, and you're going to use your hand to spread it around on your arms, make sure that you thoroughly clean your hands before you go and you start handling your camera. Another interesting question that people have asked is, what causes the bumps you see on older camera bodies? And I'm talking camera bodies from the early 1900s into maybe the 50s or the 40s. Um, you'll look at the back, what that you would release to put the film in, and you see a bunch of bumps. And sometimes you could look at the same camera used, and some of them are nice, the leatherette or the leather is nice and smooth, and other times it just looks like it's got pot marks on little hills all over the place. That's actually caused from a reaction of what they call dissimilar metals, and a lot of the backs were steel plate and used brass rivets, and brass and steel do not like each other when they're exposed to moisture. So depending on how that camera was stored, if it was in an area that was moist, then what happens is you get a chemical reaction. And having removed some coverings from cameras over the years, it would be green. It would look green, and it can be removed. But basically, if you have the bumps on the camera, it doesn't affect how it works. Many old cameras are going to have it, but if you're a very particular collector, now that you know what it is, you may look at 100 different cameras to try to find the one that at least up to this point in time, doesn't have any bumps underneath the leather. And many old camera bags that you might get, camera was stored in a dusty basement, damp basement, and if you had any brass fittings or rivets or anything on the camera bag, you may have that green material on it. You can remove it, but that's where it's coming from. What causes LCD bleed, and what is it? If you buy, a lot of people love, and I don't blame them, the old Contax rangefinder cameras. They made some really great cameras, and they had exceptional glass on them. They're really good, but they're very well known to have what they call LCD bleed, and that's just a breakdown of the LCD itself, and you get black splotches on it that eventually, may migrate and make the whole display unusable. So if you see one, and here's another thing that is an irritant, is when you're looking at one to buy and the person selling it doesn't show you pictures of the camera turned on where you can see the segments and see what's in that display and verify that you don't have any black splotches and that it doesn't intrude on the information that you're trying to read. That's kind of false advertising. That's where you're not sharing the stuff that's bad about the camera. You're showing what looks great and you're not showing what looks bad. So buyer beware on that and ask questions about it. You also had that to a much smaller extent on some of the Nikon F4 viewfinders that were, when you look through the eyepiece, there was a little LCD display at the top. And sometimes they would have that problem as well, but it wasn't anywhere near as common as the Contax. You may wonder, what's the material on the Leica cameras, and did anybody else use it? Well, they used a material called vulcanite, which is a rubber compound, and man, when it's new, it's like fantastic stuff, okay? But now you're talking 75 years later, okay, you're going to find cameras that you may want to buy, M3 cameras or M4s or what have you, and you're going to see where some of it's flaked off or some of it's cracked. And this is where I say, when you're looking at images online of any camera, you zoom in and you scan every nook and cranny of that camera, any camera that you look to buy, and you look for things, indicators. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but a lot of people try to touch it up. There's no way you're going to touch it up and not have it look like it got touched up. And I did a video. I acquired a 1957 M3. I did a video on my channel where I showed the process of removing the vulcanite and preparing it for a new leather covering. And then I showed how to put the leather covering on. In case you're interested, it's there. So either, if you just want a functional camera, you don't care. If you're just taking pictures, do you care? It's a cosmetic thing. Doesn't affect how the camera works. It all depends on what level of collectability that you're at. Another question: what causes the discoloration of camera rails on the back of the camera where that the film lays across? Sometimes, you see them and they're really they have dark spots all over them. They look like they have crud on them. And a lot of that's just caused because someone had the camera stored in a humid environment and they left a roll of film in it for the last 20 years before somebody found it. So you have some degrading of those rails or discoloration due to emulsion breakdown on the film just sitting in the camera so long. And usually it's not a problem. You're going to always see I'd say 90% of the time you look at the rails on older cameras, you're going to see some blemish on it. And most of the time it's not a problem. But of course, if it's really severe and the film doesn't lay flat, or you feel a rough edge, it could cut into the film as the film is being advanced. It won't cut into the part that gets developed, but if it raises the film up off of those rails too far, because remember, you have a pressure plate pushing down on the film against those rails, if the film's not even, you could end up with image degradation. And if you try to get aggressive with emery cloth or sandpaper, unless you really know what you're doing, you can cause a permanent problem where if you're not stopping down your lens and you're shooting wide open, maybe you don't get the result that you want. So you got to be careful. But if it looks really, really bad, don't buy it. So now I'm going to get into what kind of camera collectors are there. More than I can list, more than I can talk about. But you can have a collector that specializes in certain categories of cameras. Okay, one person might want to collect brownies. This is a baby brownie camera. Okay, so some people might just collect brownie cameras and Bakelite body. Okay, other people might get into folding bellows cameras. Here's an old Kodak. Okay. Like I said, these are the ones. See a couple bumps? These are the ones that you're going to see the bumps on. Sometimes you can't get away from it. You're going to have them. Okay. But just be aware of it. But some people collect folding cameras, and they're not all just made by Kodak. Some people like medium format cameras. I don't have one. I have them in the cabinet, but I didn't want to have all this stuff on my desk that I can't handle very well. Rangefinder cameras. Some people collect cameras that have a story. Okay, here's a Ansco auto set. Okay, this was a camera taken by John Glenn to take pictures from the Mercury capsule when he was flying over Florida. And then Ansco marketed those images and created a little set of slides that they provided with the camera as part of a marketing thing that they would give you when you bought it. And that particular camera is actually a Minolta camera rebadged. Then you have other rangefinder cameras. This one with a modern exposure meter on it. This is the 1957 Leica M3. Okay. Then you may be someone that collects SLRs. This is a Topcon RE Super. This was a major competitor, at least in terms of quality, not necessarily quantity, but was a valid competitor to the Nikon F when it came out. Removable pentaprism, so on and so forth. A very desirable camera. Okay. Some people, they get older SLRs. This is an Nikon FM3A. Okay. Black. The black bodies are usually, not always, usually worth more money and cost more money if you're going to buy them. So, like I said, you got people collecting certain types of cameras. Some people want press cameras, digital SLRs, Instamatics, instant print cameras, spy cameras, all sorts of categories that you can get. Some people only collect cameras from a certain manufacturer. They may only collect Leicas. They may only collect Voigtlanders, Contax, Rolleiflex, Zeiss, Topcon, Nikon, Canon, Minolta, Fuji, Hasselblad, and the list goes on and on and on, right? Olympus. Some collect only rare or significant cameras, regardless of who made them, or cameras that tell a story. Cameras that tell a story are great. Some cameras that I feel tell a story are some Minolta cameras that I own. or some 35 millimeter cameras that I own. I made sure I went back and I bought every 35 millimeter camera that I ever used when I was a kid growing up. I have it. They're all fully functional. That's me. I also like cameras that tell a story, like that Ansco rangefinder I showed you that John Glenn used. So you may only want to collect the cameras that you had when you were a kid, and that's it. And you're done. You go, I got them. I'm all set. Some people collect cameras based on certain time frames. They want Some people collect cameras. They have to be in the 1800s. They want old plate cameras. Okay, some want cameras that are okay from like 1900 to 1930, or 19 40s to 60s, or 70s to 2000. There's a myriad of combinations that you can apply, and everybody has their own thing going on. And their subcategory could be buying based on condition. Some folks only want near mint quality cameras that work, and they'll never see a roll of film in them. They want them because they only made so many of a certain model. They tell a story. They have a mint condition one, and they're not going to take a chance of using it other than working it and shooting it without film to just keep it exercised. But that's what they want to collect. Others are happy with a camera that's just in good or very good condition. If it has some scratches and a dent here or there, they don't care. They're more concerned about the fact whether or not it works or not, and they're going to use it. And then there's some that are in between that say, well, I'm going to use it once in a while, but I want it to really look good. And maybe they're looking at cameras that are more in that excellent to near mint condition, because they're not going to use them a lot, and they're willing to take the risk going out there and shooting them. And of course, you have folks that have camera shops or business where you may have a business that likes to have old things. You might have a restaurant that likes to display old things. Maybe they have old typewriters, old sewing machines, old cameras, old pictures. They don't care if it works or not. Okay, they're going to go to the tag sale or the garage sale or the yard sale or whatever you want to call it, sidewalk sale, and they're going to buy that camera for $5, and they're going to put it on their shelf, and they're going to be happy as a clam, and they're not going to care whether the lens has fungus, whether there's rust on it, or whatever. It's a display item only. It's something that adds to the ambience of their business, and is something that people get a kick out of seeing it when they go in there to eat, or whatever type of business you may have. Things to look for. This is where, like I said, this video isn't short. There's so many things to look for. And I'm going to show you some pictures. I went on some websites today and took little screen grabs of certain cameras with certain conditions that I'll share with you later. And some of it is really, picking and I wasn't looking for the worst of the worst either. Sometimes I just ran across something that was just pretty bad. And I'm going to show you little clips of it. But anyway, some of the items that I'm going to talk about would require you to be able to examine the camera personally, and most of the time that's not possible. So you want to ask a lot of questions of the seller if you're buying from eBay or similar sites, or even an auction house. Buyer beware. That's all I can say. Many of these cameras are from folks who found stuff in their parents' basement, or their grandparent left it to them, and all of a sudden they get the great idea, oh, I can make some money on this. I went on eBay and people were selling this camera for $500, and but they don't, and they price it at $500, even though they have no clue how it works or whether it works. But they tend to put a stupidly high price on stuff that isn't worth anywhere near what they want for it. And what drives me nuts personally, because you're going to hear me bitching a little bit, excuse the language, A lot of people post the stuff. They don't even make any effort to clean it at all. I mean, it's like, okay, you could get a vacuum cleaner, then you'd never get the dust off of it. I mean, some of these cameras are so dusty and dirty, and if they look that way and they never got cleaned, how do you know when you look at the front of the lens and you see dust? Is the dust on the outside? Is it on the inside? Is it on both? Okay. To me, if you want to sell something to anyone, you should do your due diligence and at least make an effort to clean it and make it presentable and make it so it's easier for people to really ascertain what kind of condition that the camera's in. If you want to sell a camera like that, don't sell it on eBay. It should be on a table at a tag sale or a yard sale for like asking, $20. And no one expects anything of it. They go, if I get it for $20 and I clean it, maybe I'll get a working camera. And if not, I got a cute display camera. It only cost me $20. But don't sell a camera that should be sold for $20 and try to sell it for $200. And that's what people are doing. If a seller states that the camera had a CLA done on it, clean, lubricate, and adjust, ask for a receipt. And if it does not, if it hasn't had that done, you have to assume that a CLA on a typical camera. I'm not talking a high-end Leica or a Hasselblad or something like that. I'm talking a Nikon, an Olympus, a Canon. Okay, is going to run you between, I'd say, $80 to $125, and a high-end Leica CLA, an M3 CLA, might cost you $250. And you have to consider that when you're considering putting a bid on an item, how much money you have to put into it, unless they can prove that that's been done, or you can just, sometimes you can tell that this thing was like their baby and they really took good care of it. And a lot of people will say, to try to make you feel better about buying it, I don't know anything about cameras, but I took it to a friend or I took it to a camera store and they looked at it and they say everything works. The alarm clock should be ringing in your head when you hear somebody saying that. If you can't prove it to me on a piece of paper, why should I believe you? Make the assumption that any camera that had any SLR that you buy, there's a very high probability that if it has seals in the back of the camera for where the film compartment is, the seals have probably degraded and need to be replaced, and the mirror dampening foam needs to be replaced. I have replaced both myself, and I don't consider myself an expert, but I am able to do it. But a lot of people are not going to want to do that, and that's when you ask to have a CLA, excuse me, everybody's definition of a CLA is different. When you go to a camera store or a repair facility, you want to say, what does that include? Sometimes they include automatically, we replace all the seals, we replace the mirror dampening foam. If they don't tell you they do it, they might not. That may be an extra fee. And like I said earlier, when you're looking at the pictures online, zoom in on the image as tight as you can and scan each picture they share, corner to corner. And then you're going to use what I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes as a guide in determining that condition, and good luck. And a word of caution about photographs. It's not always about what they show, it's about what they don't show. Few will show an image through the viewfinder so you can see how many dust spots there are, or proof that the metering system works. If it has an electronic metering or a match needle setup, it's nice to see the needle. It's nice to see LEDs or LCDs lit up, and determine how much dust there is. And depending on the kind of camera it is, you have a lot of dust in a rangefinder camera. You got to take it apart to clean it. You have dust Looking through an SLR, it could be dust that's on the lens, it could be dust that's on the mirror, it could be dust that's on the focusing screen. If the focusing screen is removable, then you probably got a good chance of being able to clean everything and have a nice clear viewfinder. But you have to understand the camera. You got to know what you can remove and what you can't remove, what you can get at and what you can't get at. And you got to think of all these things. Try to buy from someone, if you can get it from a camera store, or you get it from was it MPC, I think, or KEH, or a place like that. At least they have a warranty on it. If it has a problem, you can send it back. A camera store, the same thing. They'll have a warranty on it. If you buy it from an online venue, make sure that the seller has a 99% or better rating. And if they have a return policy, many do not allow returns. They sell it, they go as is. Well, that's where it gets, the policy from eBay sometimes contradicts what the seller is trying to say. Sometimes the seller says no returns, and eBay would say no, you can return it, and they got to give you your money back. But then you get into a back and forth battle, pain in the neck. Does any lens exhibit? So here's the things you're looking for. Do any of the lenses exhibit any of the problems that we previously discussed? Fungus, haze, chips, or scratches? Is there oil on the aperture blades? A slight trace is usually okay, but none is preferred. Does the aperture ring or the lever work smoothly and click stop if appropriate? Not all lens aperture rings on cameras have click stops. Some of them are just smooth through the whole range, and you line up the number with a dot or something on the lens barrel. Okay. Does the focus ring or the lever work smoothly with no stiffness due to hardened lubricant? If you have an old medium format, or a box camera, or a bellows camera, or even an old 35 millimeter, does it have its take-up spool included? Especially if you want to use it, because otherwise, let me tell you, you need a take-up spool and a Leica M3. Someone's going to be happy to sell you a used one for $60 or more online. Make sure that a lot of medium format cameras, yeah, you had a take-up spool, should be in that camera body. Otherwise, you have to buy one. Does the camera come with a case, a strap, front and rear lens caps? And for some people, collectors, depending on where you're at, what you're looking for, you can be really picky and say, well, yeah, it has a lens cap, but it's not original. The original lens had a metal lens cap that said Leica on it, or said Nikon on it, or whatever. Okay, so it's good to have something, but maybe that something doesn't meet what you want. There are people that sell rear lens caps and metal front lens caps on some cameras, and they try to get over $200 for them, depending on what camera brand it is. So if you say, oh, I got a good deal on the camera, I'll just get a couple caps. What's that going to cost me? $20? Hold your horses. You're not going to, unless it's a, somebody making their own, plastic caps that work. You want originals, you may end up paying hundreds of dollars for just a cap. Now, does the film advance smoothly? Does the film counter increment as it should, or decrement as it should? Does the film advance reset to 0 when you pop the back off, reload the film, or when you pull out? In the case of a Leica M3, it resets when you pull out the take-up spool. Much older cameras may display the shot number you're on from the paper film back on the film. If you're shooting old cameras and you got the little red plastic dot in the back where you can see the number as you advance the roll and make sure you know when to stop. Okay, so it all depends on what kind of camera you have. Look for rust in the film back area. Okay, especially on cameras that had a film back that slides off, and you have the pressure plate and you have rivets. Usually you have rivets. Sometimes you have screws, but most of the time it's rivets. See if you got rust in there. Now, it doesn't mean don't buy the camera, but it's what I call a process indicator. It gives you an indicator of how, at some point in time of that camera's life, how it was stored, that it wasn't a humid environment or it was an environment with salt air. Okay, and you have to consider that, because if you see too many of those indications of rust, you don't know what's inside the camera that you can't see. It may be cause for you to at least think twice before you buy it. Many cameras in Japan, I mean, are in much better shape than what you could buy in the United States. But on the second hand, they also live in an area that can be very humid, and it's a salt. You know, they got the ocean around them. Obviously, they got a lot of salt air, and you want to look for rust on these cameras. And look at the eyelets. Look at the camera strap rings, the little triangular rings for the camera straps, or even the round rings on the older cameras. And if those, and sometimes you'll see someone saying the camera is in mint plus 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 condition, and the ring is rusted. Seriously, it's mint plus 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 plus, and the rings are rusted. What else is rusted? Look for little things like that. It's important. Um, Look for fungus on external camera screws. Sometimes you'll see little white wisps on the metal screws on external camera parts. Look for what I call pot marks in the chrome on chrome bodied camera models. And you just see little black specks and they don't come off. It's actually, you know, part of the material got removed. Many SLRs and DSLRs have scratches and dents in the pentaprism area. You'll have many a camera that says mint condition, near mint, and then you look at the pictures closely. You make sure that you look at every angle of this pentaprism, and you make sure that there aren't any dents, okay? Because many of them will, or they'll have dents in the bottom. You have cameras with this black material, this black edge on the bottom, or sometimes this is where you have a chrome edge on the bottom. You look for pitting, you look for scratches, you look for paint removal. You check the sides, you check around any edges, any sharp edges is where you're going to see what they call brassing. If it's paint on top of brass, the paint gets worn off and you see the brass. And some people like that, and some people as a collector don't want that. Look at the bottom of the camera. Okay. Are there scratches on this bottom plate? You'd be hard pressed to see any on the bottom plate of this particular camera. But that's usually the area where you're going to see the most wear because it's mounted on a tripod. And if it's an older camera, you didn't always have tripod heads that had a cork covering or a rubber covering, or the mating surface, it was metal to metal. And sometimes you had a nice score mark, perfectly round ring that went around your thread mount for your tripod. And that isn't going away anytime soon. And like I said, if you're going to use it and maybe you don't care, it doesn't matter to you. It may matter to me and it won't matter to you. Everybody has their own thing. And scratches obviously show up a lot more on black bodied cameras, but sometimes dents don't show up so easy. I bought what I thought was a steal on a Nikon black bodied FTN, I believe it was, and and I looked at all those pictures so carefully, and then when I got it, it had a couple depressions in the back, to the right of the eyepiece, and they weren't dented where the metal was creased and there was a paint chip and you saw a real defined line, but it was really a dent. It was a depression in the metal, and no paint damage at all. And you had to hold it in the light a certain way to see it. So no matter how careful you are looking at pictures, you still may not catch it. But I still had the camera CLA because it's a phenomenal. It was a great camera, and it was worth it for what I paid for it, even though it has that, because you really have to look for it to see it, and the camera still works flawlessly. Um, Make sure your viewfinder is clear. Sometimes when you see dust and debris, it can be from a disintegrated mirror foam sitting on the mirror, which you're just gonna hold your camera upside down and use your blower and try to blow all that debris out. Um, but sometimes that debris, depending on how the camera was positioned in the bag, might actually get behind the back of a focusing screen that's a fixed focusing screen and may be a non-removable type. Or even if it's removable, if you don't have the proper tools, you can't take it off. And then you're looking through a viewfinder and you got 500 specs in there and you can't even look through it. I ended up with a camera like that. I can't use it. I can't see through it well enough to use it. Camera works fine, but I'd have to have the camera taken apart, and the camera is not valuable enough to justify the cost of doing that. So it's just um, a display queen is all it is at this point in time. Rangefinders are the worst, where you have to take them apart to clean it. And I myself, I'm not going to take apart a rangefinder camera because there's mirrors and things get jostled around in there, and then everything can get messed up. Check the leather covering on the camera body all around. Look for lifting. Cameras that had, I don't know if I can find it here, but sometimes when you get on areas where the leather wraps around and it gets to where the hinge area is, if you have a hinged back on your camera, sometimes right along the edges it's lifted or peeled away, and it's an easy fix. It isn't hard to fix it as long as it's not cracked or cut. If it's just peeled away, you could fix that pretty easy with some contact adhesive. Um, Medium format cameras, lots of times you go to buy one, the knobs had a small little dot of a leatherette on it or leather on it, and it's missing. And okay, do you want to buy it without the leather on it? Does it matter to you? It may matter to you a lot, and you may or may not be able to get it, or you may have to cut your own. Some TLRs that you get, some Raleigh Flex, they have kits to replace all the leather on those cameras. Like I talked about Leica with the Vulcanite already. Removal and replacement of a typical leatherette may run you between $100 and $200. I talked about the problems with the XD11s. Check conditions of the seals in the chamber in the back of the camera. Some real old cameras didn't need seals. They were just made, they were so light tight, they didn't have to have seals in them. But most 35 millimeter cameras have them. And between the seals and the mirror dampening foam, you have to assume that needs to be replaced, and you should factor in the cost of having that done when you bid on an item. Let's see. And there's no standardization of camera quality. Some just say, oh, the camera's poor, fair, average, excellent, and mint. Others go nuts, especially in Japanese market. It's crazy. They got EX plus plus plus, near mint plus or minus, mint plus plus plus. What does that mean? What does that mean? Look at the condition of the shutter curtain. Is it stained? It could be mildew. Okay. Another indication of poor storage. If you have multiple signs of poor storage, you may want to pass, since you You will never see the damage from inside the camera, like I mentioned before. Make sure there's no burn holes in the cloth shutters from cameras that were left sitting with the lens cap off, with the sun shining right through. It could actually burn a hole through it. Look for dents in metal focal plane shutters. Many a finger has accidentally touched one and put a dent in it, and it may make it so it's not operable anymore. Check all the shutter speeds from the lowest to the highest and ask these questions and try to get an answer. Many people will say, oh, I operated the shutter. I pushed the shutter, advanced the lever, pushed the shutter many times. It sounds good. It looks good. It worked good, blah, blah, blah. And they checked it. Many of them end up checking it at a shutter speed higher than 1/200th of a second. Well, guess what? Many cameras will work at the high shutter speeds, and they don't work, or they stick on the slow shutter speeds. You want to know that it was checked through the whole range. Many bellows type cameras from the um, cameras like this. Many of them never work at the slow shutter speeds. um, just because they haven't been used in so long. A lot of them have even some 35 millimeter cameras, even some cameras from the 50s had leaf shutters. Okay, they didn't have focal plane shutters. A lot of cameras had leaf shutters in them, and sometimes with the leaf shutters, you'd see the lens opening, closing, and when you got to the slow shutter speeds, okay, they'd get stuck. You would take the picture, and it should be open now, and they open up part way. They get stuck. Um, some areas have black painted trim areas on the bottom edge and the sides of the camera. I mean, that's what I showed you here on this Nikon. Okay, you got all these black edges. And some of them are metal. Black. A lot of them are black painted metal, and you get paint chips in them. How many paint chips do you want? Obviously, when I got this camera, I bought it because it does not have any paint chips on it. Okay, that's me. More modern cameras, you want to check any LED or LCD metering through the viewfinder, verify it works. Check the old match needle style for proper operation. And no one is going to guarantee no one is going to, other than if you bought the camera from a camera repair shop that checked shutter speed accuracy, anybody else is not going to guarantee the accuracy of the shutter mechanism. They're going to say, I can tell that it doesn't stick. It looks like it's normal. And if someone owns enough cameras and has shot long enough, you could tell by the sound and looking at it and have a pretty good idea whether it's good enough. But people selling it, many are just going to, like I said, they're going to say, oh, I pushed the button and it worked. And you're not going to get guarantees on things like that. You're not going to get guarantees on shutter speed accuracy. You're not going to get guarantees on exposure meter accuracy. And if it's an old camera with a selenium type meter in it, there's probably a 90+ percentile chance that either it never does not work anymore or is totally inaccurate. If you have a CDS type style metering system in it, you may have a pretty good chance that it's still reasonable, that it works, and it's still reasonably good, reasonably accurate. Operate the self timers. Check if it has a depth of field button, push it. Make sure it works. Check your flash sync. Smoothness of operating the controls for lifting and changing your ASA settings, your exposure compensation, your shutter speeds, etc. If you have wheels with rubberized coatings on them, you want to make sure that the coating isn't peeling off of it. Verify that the lens can be removed and reinstalled into the camera easily, and all the linkages and or electrical contacts are clean and functioning properly. Inspect the cleanliness of the focusing screen and mirror. Make sure the mirror is not desilvering. Check your mirror lockup feature if it's equipped. Look for paint or chrome chipping off the hinged door areas. And all these areas where the hinge is, very prone to peeling, cracking, blistering paint, chipping of chrome plating coming off, things like that. If you're buying an old Leica film camera, here we got the M3. Here's the back. These flash sync connectors are not standard size. Okay. So they require an adapter to work with what we consider standard PC sync cables. So if you're buying one, they do sell adapters. They're out there. You can buy them. But, if you're buying it from someone, you say, do you have any of the flash adapters here for your flash sync connectors? Good thing to ask. If you have a rangefinder, is the rangefinder focusing patch clearly visible, well-defined, and easy to distinguish whether that subject is in focus or not? Okay, how it splits the image, you have to line it up. Can you easily see that? Some cameras, as they get older, that patch gets fainter and it's harder to see. My Nikon SP, the focusing patch is nowhere near as well defined. It's usable, but it's nowhere near as well defined as the focusing patch in the same model year, Leica M3 that I have. The Leica is heads and tails better with the focusing patch than that particular Nikon SP that I have. There are other things with the SP that I like more, and that's another story. But I'm just saying that stuff you can't tell without seeing the camera. So that's some of the things I wanted to throw out there to mention. So here I'm going to share some images of things that you look for. And I didn't spend a lot of time looking for these. And it wasn't hard to find defects. And some of you have commented, oh, Jeff, a lot of the cameras you get look like brand new, or they're really great looking, or whatever. And I thank you for that compliment. And all I can say is, just so you know, that it's not, I know what to look for after years of buying old stuff, and I still get screwed once in a while. That's the scary part. And I have, at times, if I get on a vintage camera buying binge where I want to get 2 or 3 cameras, and I just get excited that I want to do that and try to find something. I am not lying to you. I may look at 4,000 cameras within a period of a week or less, 4,000 or more cameras. And maybe 1% of those I save to look at again when all is said and done. And of those 1%, so I may end up buying 2 or 3. And that's if I have a successful run. So that's how many bad cameras there are out there. And as anal as I can be at times, I get screwed sometimes. Sometimes I'll let my emotional side of the brain takes over and says that camera looks really good, even though it says no returns and as is or whatever. And I go for it and then I get it and it doesn't work. And usually you're stuck with it. You could argue with it. You might get your money back. You might get part of your money back. But, I had a recent encounter where I had that happen to me, and the person, wasn't budging, and it was going to get into an inflamed argument back and forth in writing, and I just says, I just finally just canceled the return. Said, I guess myself saying, I guess you need the money more than I do. I'm not going to go there anymore. I'm just tired of it. I got better things to do with my life than get into a big argument. And unfortunately, like I said, there's a lot of people out there that sell stuff that they have no clue about it. And it's not easy to do this. I mean, if you got a lot of money, then if you got a lot of money, let's face it, you're buying it from other collectors who have probably had the stuff for a long, long time. And maybe they're finally getting, near the end of their time on Earth, and they decide they want to unload it because no one in the family wants it. And, he or she wants to sell the collection and use the money and, whatever, give it to the grandchildren or what have you. But the real primo stuff is very, very, very hard to find. A lot of that stuff's been grabbed up many, many decades ago. But anyway, I'm going to show you some quick picks here of things to look for. Some of it is what I've already talked about, but now you're going to see some actual pictures. And as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here is an image of a box camera, and this person wasn't asking a lot of money for it, nor should they. And obviously, these cameras were basically cardboard boxes with leather on them, or leather type material on them. And many a time you find them with, gouges in them, certain, little holes in them. This is an extreme one. This doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you probably aren't going to want to buy this. But like I said, sometimes without looking very hard, I could find some pretty good examples. The next image is it's just burnishing. This is normal wear. The person had a black camera body. They used it. They proudly used this camera, whatever model it is. They liked it. And it may have had a brass top and bottom plate, or the whole thing could have been brass and painted black. And through use and pulling it in and out of a camera bag, you get those wear marks, especially around sharp edges. Will show up right away. Does this make the camera unusable? Absolutely not. Does it make it where you shouldn't want it? Absolutely not. Unless you are someone who wants cameras that are in near mint to mint condition, then you would look at another model until you found one that didn't have this. But for someone who's going to go out and continue to wear it down even more and take good pictures with it, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It's all on what you're. This is all for what you based on what you want. This is a perfect example, and this is very extremely common if you're trying to get an old Olympus Pen F or Pen FT or whatever half frame 35 millimeter camera. The plastic viewfinder many times is cracked, which eventually leads to this. And there are a lot of them that have chunks missing from them. And the reason being is these were cameras that didn't have hot shoes or cold shoes on them. They had a cold shoe adapter. How the cold shoe adapter got attached to the top of the camera was it had a piece of metal that slid down in the groove on this eyepiece, and that's what held it on. So obviously, if you have a flash now on the top of it, and you accidentally bump the flash, or the flash head gets twisted or gets hit against something, the weakest point is where that is this plastic. And that's why you see so many of them with chips and pieces removed from them. And there were many, many other cameras that had the same problem in that time frame in the 50s and early 60s, where they had cold shoe mounts that they didn't screw onto the camera in any way, shape, or form, and they slid down onto the in a groove on the eyepiece here. And so just be looking for that when you look at the old cameras. This is just some more wear marks here. This is the triangular piece, and sometimes on the older cameras they're round, but you look to see if these are rusted, and you also look in the area around to see how bad it scratched up the camera body. In this case, it took the paint right off. I remember old Leica straps used to have, they might have had round rings or even triangular rings, but they had a piece of leather that went behind it, so the ring itself did not scratch the body of the camera. Something to think about even when you buy a camera strap for an old camera. Try to find something that is going to minimize the chance of metal rubbing against metal. This is a pentaprism, probably a removable pentaprism type of camera. It very well may be a Nikon, but I'm not 100% sure. But look at that viewfinder. These are the pictures that people don't like to take. If it's a removable device, you have a chance of cleaning it. If you look through an eyepiece and you saw this on a rangefinder camera, well, you either got to live with it or you're going to pay somebody an awful lot to take the camera apart and clean that off, and hope it gets cleaned off, and hope it's not mold. But this was on a camera that was actually being sold in quote unquote near mint condition. So perfect example how a definition doesn't meet my requirement of near mint, and there were a lot of body scratches on the chrome areas around the eyepiece as well. Here's another camera that was near mint condition. Is that near mint to you? Pentaprisms take a beating. A pretty high percentage of older cameras have pentaprisms that have dents or are heavily scratched. And if it's a black pentaprism like this, to me, if it was in excellent or near mint, you might have a couple wear marks on the corners of the paint, possibly. But when you start getting into really dents like this that stand out, no, you could say it's in excellent mechanical condition, and then say cosmetically it may be good or very good. But when you have dents like this in a camera, it's hard to say that it's near mint, in my opinion. This is the back of an older bellows, folding bellows camera. This is the back, and like I said, this is not anything unusual. I mean, when you can find a camera where this thing is just nice and black and doesn't have wear marks on it or whatever, you're extremely lucky. But if you're looking at a camera that is really, it's over 100 years old, and it's a hard to find camera, you may choose very well just to overlook this, because you're buying it for the collectability of what type of camera it was, or you're using it for a display item anyway, and hopefully it's priced reasonable where that doesn't bother you too much. Here's a literal gouge on a camera that was being sold for, I believe, around, well, I'll just say over $300. When I buy a camera that has a touch sensitive grip and a chunk's missing from it, and would I pay that much? I never would. I just forget about it. But you got to look at everything. You hope they take a picture of the mirror in the camera. Here you have some slight desilvering along the edge, but then you have a little propagation here. And that's what I worry about more. If you have more of that on the mirror in other areas, then, unless you're willing to pay or get a price what it costs to get a mirror replaced, and make sure you can get it replaced before you buy the camera, you may want to pass on this one. If it's just a few specks along the edge, it's not going to affect your ability to, you won't even see it more than likely looking through the camera, and it won't affect you. But if you have lines like this or bigger splotches where the mirroring surface isn't there, then only buy it if you get a deal on it and you know that you can get it replaced. As I talked about before, scratches on the bottom plate. If you're going to use the camera and you just care that it works and it's going to get bounced around and banged up more by you, do you care? Absolutely not. If you're a collector and you want the camera to hold some value, then you probably wouldn't buy it. And some will say, well, just put a new bottom on it. Well, sometimes you can get a new bottom, but sometimes on the camera, that's where the serial number is. And you don't want to be, a serial number could be on different parts of the camera body, and you don't want to have a bottom plate that has one serial number and say the inside of where the film is loaded, there's another serial number and they don't match. And, in other words, if you change it, let people know you changed it so they don't think they're getting original parts. Here's an example of the XD11 Minolta that I told you about. It's very hard to find any of them where the leatherette, which for it was unusually thick. It was like a padded body covering, and because of that, it's very, very thick, and over time, it just peels away from the adhesive. So that's a side view. And then this one is looking across the front, and you can see how on both sides here it is peeling away from the body, and that's typical for that particular one. And I really wanted to buy one of these cameras too, but I don't feel like putting new leather on it. This is a TLR, a partial front view of a TLR, twin lens reflex camera, and once again, the leatherette is either missing or cracked. Depending on the brand of the camera, if it's a Rolleiflex, you probably have a good chance of getting replacement leatherette. In some of the more common models, the higher sellers, you can find kits out there, predominantly from Japan dealerships that send, or even German dealerships that may sell replacement leather. Rust, like I said, look for rust. And this is obviously the top of a photomic attachment prism on an F mount, Nikon F, and the button is all corroded. And like I said, you use that as a indicator, okay, indicator of how this camera was stored. And if you see that and you see rust on the back where the film is, where the pressure plate is, and you see it somewhere else, you might say, I'm going to pass on this one. And then we talked about the lenses with the fungus. Well, here you go. I got two pictures to show you of that. This is bad. This is really, really bad. And this was on a camera that was being sold as near mint condition. So I cannot underline the words buyer beware any more than I have talking about this subject matter. And I got one more lens shot to show you, but I have to get out of the screen sharing here and load up a different image. And this is a different lens on a different camera. This is not the same one that you're going to see here. See how this is more spots? And here it kind of spreads out like tendrils on it. Are you going to, seriously, are you going to want to, you think you're going to get a good image with that? You think you're going to be able to clean that? Maybe. Depends how long it's been there. Maybe, maybe not. But I'm leaning more towards the maybe nots. And it looks like somebody probably already tried to do work on it at some point, because look at the hairline crack here. This is where you would get a tool to put in these holes to unscrew the back and pop that lens out. And it looks like it was worked on at one time, or somebody tried to get it off and they couldn't, and it cracked, and so they gave up. So would I buy that? Absolutely not. So that's just a really just buyer beware, not to scare you, but don't go into it thinking that everybody out there is your pal, and if they say it's great, and like new, my uncle used it, hasn't been used in 3 years, but the last time it was used, it worked fine. And I mean, a lot of it is in what you see, and like if you have the opportunity to actually physically hold it, advance the film lever, turn the rewind knob, make sure the film advance works, do all those things I talked about during this long show, then you could come away with a really, really decent camera at a really good price. You could get I'd say, excellent, at a minimum, an excellent to a near mint SLR camera, um, of one that was, relatively high production, and you can get one with a really good lens on it. Probably be a 50 millimeter, and you can pay less than $180 for it in many, many cases. Sometimes you get lucky and you can get one that's in great shape for 120. But you got to remember, if you can't change the seals and the mirror foam yourself, you may be adding another 120 on top of that. But still, $250 for a first camera for somebody trying to learn photography and they want to use film, and you can get them a decent camera and put a little bit of money into it and give them a perfectly cosmetically excellent camera that works mechanically perfect for $250. That's nothing to complain about. People are paying more than that for old point and shoot cameras right now. So that's it with showing you the images. Obviously, if you're looking at cameras that were made in the 1800s and you're getting into field cameras and plate cameras and real old stuff like that, that's a whole entirely different discussion, a whole different type of lens technology. Some that had aperture ring, an aperture knob on it that you can turn, and many where you had to slide in different size rings to reduce the aperture manually. And as I said before, expect dust in older lenses as well as air bubbles in the glass. You can have a fair amount of dust and still get really good shots. Large scratches and chips are the bigger problem, along with mainly the fungus, haze, and that is what's going to kill you. Hard to quantify regarding the dust, as I said before. You clean things the best you can. If it's a film camera, you throw a roll of film in it and you take it and you see how it looks. And if you don't like the results, or you can't, let's say you do the film and you have it and you scan it yourself, or you have the images scanned and you can't adjust it well enough in post to make it look good, then you might have to pay the money to have a CLA done on the lens. As Columbo would say, one more thing. You have to really consider the model of the camera that you're buying and its rarity. Some of these cameras you can't get parts for anymore, and others have few people that can even work on these cameras anymore. They've all passed on. They weren't able to pass on their knowledge. No one's replaced them. So I've worked with several repair facilities and have had very good luck with Vermont Camera Works, Jim McRae in Pittsford, Virginia. Excuse me, Pittsford, Vermont. Getting tired, too much talking. Check him out. He works on a wide variety of camera models. He does sell some vintage camera gear and lenses. And at least if you buy something, if he has something there that you like and you buy it, he's checked it out thoroughly and he's adjusted it and he's checked the shutter speeds and so on and so forth. So I like to call out people who I'm satisfied with. And don't rule out buying cameras from, I mentioned it before on my Leica video, buying it from someone that sells antiques. And I'm not saying that the cameras are necessarily going to be perfect working order or anything like that. But the difference is between them and buying online is you can hold it, you could touch it, you could check it yourself and make your own determination whether it's worth buying it or not. It's really, really, if you have the opportunity of seeing it before you lay your money down, that is always the best bet. So take care, everyone. I hope you get something out of this. And as I say, enjoy life, capture some of it. Take care. And remember, I am your father. No! Hey, folks, remember to give me a thumbs up and a like and join the club. Sign up as a regular. I would appreciate it. And we'll see you again down the road. Take care.